because this movement is strengthened by its diversity, and all the voices, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, are vital to us making the world a better place for animals. Thank you. So I'm going to start this talk by being honest with you about something. I'm not a scholar, and I'm not an academic. I don't come from money. Actually, I was raised by a single mum on a council estate. And I am fortunate, though, because my mum raised me and my brothers vegetarian, which is awesome, especially considering my youngest brother needs special care. And even despite the issues that he faces, he is now a passionate vegan and animal advocate as well, which is awesome, I think. Round of applause for my little brother. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to realize that all I am is a regular person who decided to start speaking up for animals and became passionate about animals and vegan advocacy. And I started a YouTube channel and an Instagram and built that up. But ultimately, I'm still just that regular guy who started talking about animals. And I think it's really important that you get that, and that you get that me talking to you today is me coming to you asking and hoping you're just going to listen to what I have to say, despite how uncomfortable it might get in a couple of moments. So the title of my presentation is the number one threat to vegan unity. I did see a couple of people online joking that that was me, which was a little unpleasant to see. But we'll get into that as well. What we are going to get into is, it's not just for drama, this title. Like, I didn't make this just to get you in here, although that was a big part of it. We are actually going to take a look at some of the real challenges we face as a movement in terms of unity. We're going to address them head on, and we're going to hopefully unlock a few keys to greater unity and effectiveness. This presentation could just as easily be titled 5 Steps to Vegan Unity, to be totally honest with you. So to start with, let me take you back to 2017 when I first got into activism. So when I started activism, I was really genuinely very happy. I made friends right away. I felt a great sense of belonging. I was learning, having fun, and I was finally able to hang out with people who shared my values and that I didn't have to constantly argue with them asking me stupid questions about protein. So it was really, honestly, an amazing beginning, but things did soon take a bad turn, unfortunately. It started to go wrong when I decided to start the first ever Direct Action Everywhere group in Barcelona, where I was living at the time. Because I was excited to organize actions, I was inspired by direct action. I thought, this is great, we should do this here. And unfortunately, I was told that some people in the vegan community there, they weren't happy and they wouldn't be attending my events, or not my events, but you know, the DXE events. Now, this wasn't because of some issue with DXE. It wasn't because of some disagreements on strategy or anything like that. The reason they were not going to come to the events I was running is because the group was being led by a straight white male. Which is tough to hear, that that's the reason people aren't going to come and fight for animals at your event. Despite this, the good news is a group of passionate activists did come, and we did lots of amazing, powerful actions with DXE in Barcelona. And I'm forever grateful to those people who showed unity for animals at that time when there was pressure on them to not come. But within a year, these discussions continued and actually started to gain traction. These discussions, I guess you could call them against white men, against straight white men. After just a short time as an activist, bear in mind, this is about a year in for me, I was feeling really unwelcome in the movement, and a lot of people also were, and a lot of people that weren't straight white men were also looking at this and feeling this is very hostile, like what's going on here? It seemed there was a large contingency of people that didn't want people who looked like me to speak up for animals, which, you know, was confusing and, as I said, very, very unwelcome feelings. And it wasn't just a one-off. This kind of rhetoric has continued and continues today, but one part of it was back in 2018 during a large activism event. The issue of there are too many white men on social media came up. There was criticism that, hey, look, social media activism, there's too many men here, and especially too many white men. And I took the opportunity to suggest that, well, let's do something about it then. Let's try and encourage more women to step into the online activism space and produce high-quality, consistent videos. Now, to my knowledge, I could have been wrong, but to my knowledge at that moment, there wasn't really anyone doing that apart from Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong. There were people kind of dipping their toe, but those were the two main people who had committed fully to high-quality, consistent videos. So I was suggesting that, well, there we go. This is how we fix this. Women step up and do the same thing, and then you'll have representation in the online space. This was misunderstood, and a campaign was started against me. People labeling me, a couple of people, two people, labeled me as sexist. Instead of seeking clarification on what I'd said, they jumped the gun and decided to spread misinformation about what I'd said. They even took to messaging people about me, people who followed me, telling them, don't follow this guy because he's a sexist, which again, horrible to hear these kinds of things being said about you after you just try to help. I'm pleased to say, again, there's some good news though, because despite that incident and the horrible feelings that came with it, I continued over the years trying to inspire people to start and improve social media activism, and it led to me starting this group here, the Vegan Social Media Community, which is a WhatsApp group. We have about 60 members, and we just focus on trying to get people's content as good as it possibly can be to reach as many people as possible. If you're interested in joining, just find me, DM me. My email and stuff will be up at the end, and we'd love to have you. Now, back to 2018, and later that year, or maybe earlier in the following year, I traveled to India with my partner, Annie. Some of you might remember, some of you who follow the social media might remember I spent quite a long time in India. We did a lot of work over there. We were working for an animal rights organization that wanted to start new groups over there. And also we were documenting and filming in farms and slaughterhouses over in India, which, if you've never seen what they look like over there, it's as bad as you're imagining. So while looking through some of the old photos from India, I found some absolutely horrific photos and videos, but I figured we don't want to see that for obvious reasons. But I wanted to show you this. This was a nice moment in India. This was the moment where I learned Hindi, but not with humans. I learned how to speak Hindi to a cow. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened there. I must have tapped it again.
Oh.
I can only imagine how confusing this must have been for the cow. What are you? This was at a sanctuary, I have to confirm, by the way. This was a rescued cow. So that was one of the nicer moments we had in India. Just wanted to share that with you to try and lighten the load a little bit, because it's pretty intense, the topic we're getting into. Another one of the more fun things that we did in India was that we were able to participate in a children's street play, because one of the activists over there was doing street plays for kids, and this particular street play had a vegan message. So my wife and I, we were invited to give little 5 seconds of dialogue each as part of some very cringy street play. We said things like, we should love animals and we shouldn't kill them, something along those lines. There is a video of this online somewhere, but I couldn't find it. I'm sorry. It's just as cringe as you're imagining, though. Now, unfortunately, of course, the reason I'm telling you this is because that also went south. That went badly. This video, when it did go online, it sparked a campaign from Western activists who said that we were colonizers for taking part in that play and telling Indian people what to do. That rhetoric continued and spread to, actually, you should never have gone to India in the first place, because just you being there, working on behalf of this organization, was in essence colonization. This was incredibly disheartening. And considering what we were doing out there, considering the things we were seeing on a daily basis, really difficult to continue working after that. Now, a year or so later, in 2020, we had a lot of horrible things going wrong. 2020 was certainly a memorable year, but at the height of the horrible things, there was the terrible situation with George Floyd that took place, which I'm sure everybody in here remembers. And this became another massive source of division for the entire movement. You were seeing that vegans who didn't post a black square or vegans who didn't comment on this situation were being branded as racist and also being told you're not actually a vegan unless you talk about this. This rhetoric seemed pretty widespread. I made a YouTube video at the time trying to bring some sense to everything. I basically said in this video, focus on your activism and, don't try to guilt trip people into speaking on things that they're not comfortable speaking on, of course with the caveat that they're not causing the issue, obviously, right? The backlash came in pretty quick from that one, and the organization I worked with terminated our working relationship, citing this video as the main reason. And that's not the only division. This is a short list, by the way. We're almost through it. We had COVID. Obviously, that we all know what that was like within the movement. Vaccines, we have these internal discussions, and they're more like fights, intersectional versus non-intersectional vegans, abolitionism versus welfare, global issues like Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, Israel, all of these things dividing the movement, with every side attacking the other side and saying they're not really vegan, they're the bad ones. To give you some specific examples, we've had pro-Palestine vegans accusing people, vegans who don't speak up, of enabling genocide, questioning their veganism, of course. We've had pro-Israel vegans accusing vegans who are critical of Israel of promoting anti-Semitism and inciting hatred for Jews. Just recently, in Melbourne, there were some pro-Palestine vegans who came to the National Animal Rights Day protest there and disrupted an animal rights protest because they believed the founder of the organization and some of the activists in Tel Aviv had pro-Israel sentiment. So just to clarify, they disrupted a protest in Melbourne because of issues that were happening in Tel Aviv. And these are just some of the issues, some of the conflicts that I've seen or witnessed in the last 6 or 7 years. If I were to go through every single one, I'd be here for another hour. There's so many more than that. I had to cut out about 3/4 of this part of this segment because it's getting too long. My question to you is, rhetorical by the way, I don't want hecklers if it's all right, not yet. How can any one activist experience all of this and keep going? Bear in mind what we have to face just through activism and then all of this on top of it. What is all of this division costing us? Well, we have some data, actually. Research by We the Free tells us that 89% of activists have witnessed this, which is not a surprise to me, actually. You spend more than 6 months in this movement, you're going to see it. 83% said that it negatively affected their mental health or contributed to their burnout, which, on top of what they're already going through simply by doing the animal rights work, is just phenomenal. And 64% of them know someone who left the movement because of it. I know multiple people who left the movement because of this. I'm sure you do. Put your hand up if you know somebody who's left the movement because of this. It's a lot of people. Now, I do want to clarify something before we continue, that my aim is not to undermine people's genuine concerns. That's not the aim of this talk. My aim is to address how we communicate these issues with each other and to encourage unity. Because, and I want to acknowledge one thing as well before we continue. I'm well aware, and probably a lot of you who know me are aware, that I've not been very good at de-escalating these situations in the past. It's something I recently became a lot more aware of, that I've poured fuel on the fire in a lot of these situations, and I've learned this, all right? I've learned that being reactive is not helping. It caused more issues, it caused more division, it didn't solve the problems. Because the issue, I think, one of the things I realized that we have an issue with, and actually why all society has an issue with this, people today are basically addicted to outrage. So if you're reactive, it doesn't stop it, it just keeps fueling it. So if being reactive isn't the solution, I mean, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, right? But it took me a few years to figure it out. What is the solution then? Well, let's get into what's happening and how we can fix it. Sigmund Freud, who's the founder of psychoanalysis, he calls this the narcissism of small differences. Have you guys heard of that? Has anyone heard of that? Okay, okay, this is great, cool. So what it means is, he theorized that when communities have a lot in common with each other, they have conflict over the differences they have. The reason for this is that each of us needs to have a distinct identity. We need to stand out and we need to feel different from those around us, because when we don't, it threatens who we are. Because no one likes to, you see how people have identity crises? That's because it's on discomfort. People don't like that discomfort, so they have to stand out. And when we're all so similar, that becomes very difficult. In our movement, this often looks like, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, we have kind of mini competitions, don't we? Who's the most vegan, right? I'm going to criticize you because you do something different to me, and I'm more vegan than you. Or who's the most ethical? I do all of this stuff, you only do animal rights. It's a race to the top. It's a race for who's the better person. And it's all just to maintain that identity that we're all chasing. Someone's taking that really tough. That's like, it's not going down well at all. So this need to feel superior is clearly driving us apart. And I think the first step to fixing, by the way, I'm giving you some potential solutions, but I'm not a psychoanalyst. I said at the beginning, right, these are my opinions, so take them with a pinch of salt. But what I think is a good way to start is to be aware of this. Nobody here, well, one person knew, but most people didn't know what the narcissism of small differences is. Now you do know what it is. You can be aware of it, recognize this is a flaw of how we work up here, and focus instead on what you fundamentally agree on, the more important things that we agree on. Because disagreements are inevitable, but they don't need to lead to division as long as we focus on the fundamental core things that we do agree on. So that could be the first two steps in unifying our movement. One, focus on the fundamental important things we agree on, and two, be tolerant of the disagreements that we have. Next, I think that we could benefit from adopting what's called a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And this comes from a Stanford psychologist named Carol Dweck. What she says is that a growth mindset is, instead of seeing a challenge or a different opinion as a threat, which a lot of us do, we should view them as an opportunity to learn and grow and develop ourselves. If we can shift to that kind of mindset, surely that's going to help us to unify and soothe some of this division, you would hope. So that could be our third step in unifying our movement. See disagreement as a chance to learn and a chance to grow. Basically, we have to give each other just more of a chance, more leeway. I'm happy to give you a little bit of an embarrassing personal example of this if you'd like. Would you like that? So about 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I learned about an activist called Tobias Leinart. Do you know who he is? Some people, I'll explain in case you don't, in case some people don't. So he's the co-founder of the organization ProVeg, and he also authored this book on how to create a vegan world. So this is who he is. Now, he had gained quite the bad reputation with the people I was hanging around with. They told me his book was terrible. They said it's trash. It's going to harm animals. He's harming animals. He's bad for the movement. He's an apologist. He's not even a vegan. He's just a terrible person, and you shouldn't read his book, and you shouldn't listen to him. And if you do, you're not a real vegan. You're not an abolitionist. You're a terrible person. That's what I was told. And previous me, past me, believed every word of it. I never looked at his book. I never looked at him. I thought, yep, there he is, blacklisted. Never going to look into this guy. But last year, I came here for the first time. It's a cool little crew. And I was able to see Tobias speak. And after hearing him speak, I realized how wrong my friends were and how wrong I was for making that decision to not look into him. Because I learned this man, Tobias Lehner, I learned that he's a passionate advocate. He's been working to make the world a better place for animals for the last over 20 years, I believe. And I realized while watching him speak that he's probably spent more time coming up with strategies to help animals over breakfast that day than I'd spent over the last 7 years. And that was a tough pill to swallow, to realize that you actually don't know shit. What I'm trying to say is he's worth listening to, absolutely worth listening to, and I felt stupid for believing those rumors instead of actually looking into his work. I've read his book. I found it really interesting. It's influenced my work massively. And this whole experience taught me something incredibly valuable. It taught me the value of contact, the value of spending time with someone you disagree with or that you think you disagree with, because that can really open your eyes. And I've got a very extreme example of this. To be clear here, it's nothing to do with Tobias Lehner. We're going to make a bit of a jump here, so just come with me. If you weren't paying attention, pay attention now. This has nothing to do with Tobias Lehner. But an example that shows this is the example of Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis is a black man who convinced members of the KKK to leave the group. How did he do that? That seems impossible, surely. All he did was he sat with them, listened to them, exchanged ideas with them, and did it all without judging them. If he can walk into places where people literally probably want him and his family dead, and sit with them and have these discussions in the hopes of bringing them out of that hatred and succeed, surely we can learn to do the same with the people in our movement that we may have minor disagreements with. Is that too much to ask? Do you think? So the fourth step to vegan unity could be make contact without judgment. But we do have a problem, because what if you think someone's being inappropriate or dangerous? Well, if you think this, it's not necessarily true. So the first thing we've got to do is have a calm and reasonable dialogue with this person. We give non-vegans endless chances to change, don't we? We spend so much time with them. We look for all the different techniques and tactics to try and bring them to our side. Why can we not extend that same courtesy to someone within our own movement who we think has a bad opinion or a dangerous opinion? I don't think outreach is just for non-vegans. I think it's for us too. And I would recommend trying using something called first principles thinking, which is something I learned about recently. So first principles thinking is when you take an issue and you remove all of your assumptions and you only look at what is actually true and build from there. So you strip back everything else and start from what has happened, not what you think has happened. So here's how it could look if you're dealing with somebody potentially dangerous that you think could be dangerous. First thing you can do, ask yourself, what specific behaviors, words, or actions have led you or other people to the conclusion that they are dangerous? Separate the assumptions from the facts. Identify the core issue. Ask why repeatedly to get to the bottom of it. Why do their words or actions make you think they hold dangerous beliefs? Why do their beliefs make you feel uncomfortable or make you feel like they're dangerous? Get to the nature of what's going on here. Try to understand the motivation and the context. This one's really difficult because obviously if you don't hold the same view as them and you think they're dangerous, it's really difficult to see why they got there. But understanding, are they coming from a place of ignorance, or is it misunderstanding, or is it fear? That's really valuable information to have. Or something else. Or is something influencing them? Did they just have a loss in the family? Did they just lose one of their companion animals? Something traumatic? Are they under a lot of stress? Is there something making them act out? Again, something really important to consider to find the root of the problem. Challenge the beliefs, your beliefs and their beliefs. What evidence supports the idea they have dangerous beliefs? Could it be interpreted differently? Are your beliefs based on solid reasoning, or are you just making assumptions? Speak with them and try and understand their perspective. Ask them open-ended questions. Like we said, outreach is for each other too. It's not just for non-vegans. Try and encourage them to speak up without making them feel attacked. It can help reveal where their behaviors are coming from. Look for solutions based on some core principles that you have. So even if you hold diametrically opposing beliefs on one topic, there's a very high chance that you have a lot of shared common beliefs on something else. In this case, animal rights, veganism. Yes, perfect timing. Or maybe they share a common belief in respect and fairness. Maybe they value those things. You can work on that. And you can use those agreements that you have to start building a problem-solving solution here rather than a conflict. You can say things like, well, if you believe in fairness and respect, clearly look at how your actions are harming these other people. It doesn't seem like that aligns. And you can get to the root and the bottom of what's going on a little bit quicker and effectively. And then reflect and adjust. So after the conversation, ask, did this work? Did it go right? What went really wrong? So that next time you don't make those same mistakes or you do the same things that worked. If it wasn't fully resolved, well, just consider that just like a non-vegan, it might take a few more conversations and a little bit more exposure to different ideas before this person starts to make a change and change what they believe. You're soon going to see that this person that you maybe had in your head that was evil, you're soon going to see that it's probably not that they're evil. In fact, in most cases, it isn't going to be the case. In most cases, it's going to be that you have a lot of commonality and foundational beliefs that you align on, but they have different beliefs on how to achieve those things, and that's where most of our conflicts happen. You'll see that this is just a regular person, most likely, with some views that you may not agree with, which is not the same as being an evil person. I hope you'll all agree. It's all about focusing on those fundamentals, like we said earlier. There's no denying that we are emotional people. I think that's probably why most of you are actually here. It's why I'm here. I'm a very emotional person. I couldn't ignore what was happening to animals, and neither can you. And I think that can sometimes be our downfall. Again, I'm glad we're getting some agreement. I think sometimes we could do with applying some reason to our emotional points. I think it could really help us. So let's use one of my experiences from earlier as an example of this. Do you remember we talked about the campaigns against the men and the white activists, the white men? And I'm sure you remember. I'm sure that was a standout point for a few people. Now, I understand, to clarify here, and I wanted to come back to this to say this, I know why there are concerns about representation of white men within our movement. I know these concerns come from a place of wanting to ensure fairness and equity, all right? I'm not ignorant. I understand. But we need to take a little closer look at the leadership and foundational roles within some of the key organizations in our movement and acknowledge a few things. Because all of these incredibly influential groups have one thing in common, which is a little bit opposed to the ideas we were discussing earlier. Because the founder and director of the Animal Save movement is an eater. PETA, one of the most well-known animal rights organizations, founded and directed by Ingrid Newkirk. Viva, organization led by a woman, Juliette Galatly. Direct Action Everywhere was founded by Wayne Chung. Animal Rebellion, co-founded by a woman and is co-directed by Rose, who's also at this conference. The Animal Justice Project was founded and directed by a woman, Claire Palmer, and ProVeg was co-founded by Melanie Joy, who's been at this festival giving talks as well. So that's pretty interesting, is it not? It's a very good thing. It's a very positive thing that I think has been overlooked here. Now, it is true, though, saying that, it is true that the most prominent online vegan activists are probably Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong, and there is a predominance of white men in that space. That's true. But we're missing a huge point here. We're missing the fact that there are significant contributions from women and people of color in other areas having way more success in their messaging than all of the activists put together. And that's in the plant-based and the lifestyle side of all of this, because I'm sure you'll all agree with me, plant-based recipes, lifestyle blogs, they're important to normalize veganism. They're important to make it accessible. And that space is dominated by women and people of color. And trust me, their view counts and their engagement is like 100 times what the biggest animal rights activist is getting on YouTube. It's insane, the amount of engagement they get. So they're dominating that space. And one more thing that I think we're overlooking here before we move on is that we are in Europe, and In other Western countries, it's much the same. The demographic makeup of Europe and most of the West includes a majority of white people and about a 50-50 split between men and women. So just naturally, we're going to see a lot of white men in this movement. It's just going to happen. So I think with this broader perspective, I hope with this broader perspective, that we can recognize that these diverse contributions from all members of our community are important, and we can unify our efforts and not allow these misconceptions to create division. Because this movement is strengthened by its diversity, and all the voices, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, are vital to us making the world a better place for animals. I'm going to have to speed through this because I'm way behind, surprisingly. But one more thing, I think, before we close up. I know that these ideas are going to cause backlash within your organizations and potentially within your groups. I understand that it's kind of scary to try and bring these points up because people threaten to leave your organization, they threaten to cancel you, they campaign against you. I've been at the other end of it. I know what it feels like. But we have to focus on the fundamentals. We have to focus on our shared goal of fighting for animals. We can't let people addicted to outrage control our narratives. We can't let the plight of the animals and our work for them be held hostage to whenever people start shouting and threatening to leave your organization. That's not fair for the animals, and it's not fair for the rest of the activism movement. It's important to acknowledge genuine concerns, but we also need to have the courage and the perspective to see when something is a genuine concern and when something is not, and when something has been blown out of proportion. We need to be able to see the difference. And we can't let fear of cancellation or losing support dictate our actions when we're talking about life or death for animals. And that brings us on to our fifth and final step to unifying the movement: make decisions based on unifying solutions, not based on fear of cancellation, attacks, or threats of people removing their support. Now, I can tell you that some organizations have actually already implemented this, and yes, there's been pushback from a few individuals, but the vast majority of people are very, very happy about them implementing this type of communication and this type of system. I won't name them, because I don't know if they want to be named, but you know them, and some of them are here. And it's going really well. For myself, I've been doing my best to keep my reactions to a minimum. I've been looking to build bridges and build unity. That's the reason I'm even here today, to try and build unity and try to build bridges with people that maybe don't like me, to be totally honest with you. I'm trying to fix these issues. I've removed over about 50 videos from my channel that I felt were divisive. Some of you probably seen some of them, and I've looked back and I've realized that, like I said, I was reactive a lot at the time. So I'm trying to make these changes because I want to lead by example, and I think that's what we need to do overall. I think all the organizations and people in here and activists, I think if we all start leading by example with the steps we've just gone through here, I think we'll see a much more unified movement. And we need that, because the animals, they're facing horrors worse than you would see in the most disgusting horror movies, but they're not movies. They're real, and they're happening every single minute of every single day. We can't be fighting with each other over somebody liking a tweet, right? Or following a certain celebrity, or having an unpopular opinion on a current topic. We can't afford to be fighting over these things. So I want to ask, as we move forward, can we commit to unity, support, and a shared focus on our ultimate goal? Can we commit to making the world a better place for animals? And I believe we do have the power to make that vision a reality. I think we can do it, but only if we come together and if we unite. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, so I see your hand up here, and then I come over there.
Hello. I was told that your talk today, you were going to welcome far right-wing fascists into the movement, I really appreciate what you've done there. And I can't believe that my only fault with your talk is on a technical point, but I'm starting for the fault. But you haven't mentioned the introduction into the billions of years of evolution of the mobile phone, you know, of social media. All the people, I feel at home here. I've spent 40 years in this movement, and you people feel like my family. You're my brothers, you're my sisters, and I'm not getting what I call it the troll vibe. I haven't heard anyone yet say, what's the point of listening to talking and drinking tea? There's a McDonald's down the road. No doubt people are saying that on Facebook, if you took a look at the international, you know, it's just a talking shop. You'll come here, and this is the real life. When we're able to talk to you later, we'll be able to, I have it a bit eye to eye. I've never talked to you before. I'm looking forward to talking to you later. And I'll be able to get, like you said, you sat down with the guy and you learnt more about his strategy. Spending 2 minutes with you in the real world is going to give me more information than reading all the stuff I'm ever going to read you out on the phone. And I was hoping for a bit of controversy, kind of. Maybe it's because I'm addicted to, but it's not. The reason I was, because I really appreciate what you've done. And what a scary world when we just agree with everything that each of us say. What a disgusting, I don't want to be in that world. I want to live in a world where we have proper stand-up arguments. I can't have the stand-up argument with 3 lines on a phone, but maybe me and you can have a blistering argument later. You know, and we're all being dumbed down. And I really appreciate, and I was hoping for a bit more controversy, because that's interesting. I like that thing about addicted to controversy, but massively, what else do we get together in the real world? You know, we take for granted this fucking thing, and it's done wonders for us. I haven't got okay. So, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to give everyone the opportunity, and maybe you can both get together and have another conversation. I think that would be really great. Okay.
While you're finding the next person, I'll just comment on what he said. You're right, I should have mentioned phones. I think phones are also a massive cause of a lot of the conflicts, because we don't, you know, it's like a great analogy is how guns got so efficient. So now somebody can literally pull a gun out and shoot before they think. That's kind of like the phone, whereas the old guns, you would have to spend about 5 minutes loading the thing. And by the time you loaded it, maybe you calm down. You know, like, actually, maybe I don't want to shoot you anymore. And that used to be what it was like with conversation. Like, oh, I'll see you at the pub next week, and I'm going to absolutely drill you. By the time you see them at the pub, you're like, I don't even remember. What were we fighting about? But the phone takes that away. It's just like, oh, let's go immediately. Yeah.
Wanted to address a few things of what you said, because like you are a white man talking about this, and I'm wondering if you consider that you have like blind spots for some of the problems that are faced by women, for example, from sexism, minorities, queer people, etc. And that when you talk about including all people with all opinions and looking away from these. Like you talk about it as if it's like a problem with a Facebook post that people make or something like that, but the problem is the ideas that lie behind it and the views that lie behind it. So as a minority myself, I would not feel very welcome in a group where there are racist or people with racist opinions. So most likely I would just pull myself from a community where that's accepted, which I have done before in some groups, and then I found alternative groups where people are like, more open for total liberation, which I think is also. You mentioned about fighting for animals as if it's about having empathy. I think it's about logical arguments for why to fight for total liberation and the liberation of everyone. So you talked about unity and including everyone, but at the end of your talk, you kind of mentioned as well that means some people will leave, and you're like, that's fine. But what I'm worrying about is that you're then being accepting towards the majority of people, especially because we live in Europe, as you said yourself, there are fewer minorities, there's a lot of racism as well. So then you would be open to the majority being there and kind of excluding minorities who don't feel safe or welcome in those groups.
Yeah, it's good that you're bringing this up, because it's a massive misinterpretation of what I said, and this is the problem, that if you didn't bring that up now, I imagine there could have been a tweet at some point down the line, and it's good that you're actually addressing it with me. So it's a misinterpretation, because the last thing that I want is to bring someone into here that makes people leave because this person hates them. Like, that's not a solution to unity. That's not unifying. What I'm pointing out is that there are genuine concerns, and there are concerns that we can deal with internally that don't result in people being branded as a sexist, racist, etc., because we're not taking the time to understand what is actually going on. Usually what we're doing is what I said earlier, it's the quick fire, boom, you said that one thing, get out of here. There's no attempt to understand, there's no attempt to educate, there's no attempt to bring that person in and have them change. And I'll tell you what happens when you exclude people. Maybe someone made a joke that was not okay. Maybe it was like a mildly racist joke. So not something that's on the face racist, but if you look at it a little bit, it's racist, right? So let's say we have someone who's done that. Is excluding them going to make them more or less racist? Pushing them away from the people who care about these issues, does that make them more racist or less racist? I think we know the answer. It makes them more racist, because who are they going to go to? People like that, who like that humor, and it just keeps going that way. So my point is not to include people who are clearly off the edge, just irredeemable, right? But I don't believe that that's the majority, or even most people that we come up against. I think most people that make these kinds of comments or make something that's offensive within our spaces, they do so out of a lack of understanding or something else, as we discussed, an external factor. And I think the solution, and a lot of the times, especially considering how tiny and a minority we are as a movement, is to at least try to make that person shift their perspective. Because who else is going to do it if not us? We're the ones who care. I just don't believe exclusion is always the answer. That's the point.
Okay, thank you, David. So there is just a quick comment that I want to add. We're out of time for questions, but I just want to read out this comment from one of the online audiences that says, thank you for the superb, enlightening, and vitally critical presentation. And another person then wrote, I can only agree with that. Thank you. So thank you, David.
Thank you to those people. I appreciate it.